Welcome to Drama-Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. I'm your host, Jess Cording. I'm a registered dietitian, health coach, and author, and I'm here to help you streamline your wellness routine and establish a sane, more balanced relationship with food and fitness so you can reach your goals without losing your mind. On this podcast, we'll talk about nutrition, exercise, self-care, mindset, and more. I'll be bringing you interviews and expert insight on the topics that matter to your health and wellness. Hi, and welcome back to the Drama-Free Healthy Living podcast. I'm your host, Jess Cording, and today I am thrilled to bring back Dr. Naidoo to chat all about her new book, Calm Your Mind with Food, a revolutionary guide to controlling your anxiety. I'm pretty sure Dr. Naidoo is the first guest we've had on the show now 3 times, and it is always just such a joy to speak with her. I cannot say enough good things. For those of you guys who are not familiar with Dr. Naidoo, and if you've been following this podcast, I'd be shocked if that's any of you guys. So Dr. Naidoo is a nutritional psychiatrist and the author of the now considered a classic, This Is Your Brain on Food. We talk a lot in this episode about how food can play a role in anxiety management. We talk a lot about specifically the gut-brain connection and the role that gut health plays in anxiety. We talk about as well the connection between metabolic health and mental health. She gives us a few teasers of what you can find in the book. She shares a few of the 6 pillars for calming the mind. We also get a little bit into the best diet patterns for mental health. So, for example, she shares about an expanded version of the Mediterranean diet that she highlights in her book. We also talk a little bit about intermittent fasting and intuitive eating and which ones she has found to be useful for her patients working on their mental health. We also talk about people who maybe, they know that they need to make a change, but they're just feeling a little overwhelmed, where to start. So we do get into that as well. We also talk about, which was really fun to hear about, the recipe development process for this book and the recipe development, the testing, kind of what goes on behind the scenes that we don't always think about when looking at a book with recipes and meal plans. We also talk about her self-care essentials and sort of what was different while writing this book from writing her first book. And so just in addition to being a wealth of knowledge and a wonderful human being, Dr. Naidoo is also a good sport. Mercury was still retrograde when we recorded this, and as soon as we were about to hit record, I dropped a full glass of water all over my workspace and had to hit pause while I cleaned up that mess. And she was very patient and waited for us to officially start while I got it together. So, all right, without further ado, let's get to today's episode. Dr. Uma, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Jessica. It's always great to be here to talk to you.
I think you might be the first guest I've had on 3 times now on the show, it's always such a pleasure to talk with you. And we've talked, you have so much wisdom to share about nutrition and how it can help with our mood and how food can really play a role in improving our well-being. And I'm so excited to be talking about your new book that is coming out. I think this podcast is going live launch week, so congratulations.
Thank you. I'm so excited for that.
It's something that I have been wanting to ask you about for some time because I think it's so interesting in the health and the nutrition world how there are some things that when they're a little bit newer, people are not always welcoming of them and embracing. And maybe you had a very different experience, but I'm so curious to know that when you first started introducing or incorporating nutrition into your psychiatry work, did you encounter any pushback, or from the beginning were people very open and like, wow, this makes so much sense?
I think it was a mixed bag. I think I was very fortunate that I was very supported by the department in the hospital that I work, in the sense that I was given free rein to really follow the principles I'd been developing and follow up on the research that I'd been doing. And all of this actually happened before my first book, which is called This Is Your Brain on Food, about which we've spoken in the past. And in that way, it was really a very positive experience. I think that with some colleagues and with a client or patient who wasn't necessarily ready for this type of intervention, Sometimes people don't find it helpful, but I didn't allow that to dissuade me. And I really, as with the way that I think about nutrition in general, I'm much more inclusive than I am ever eliminating or excluding of either foods or people, for that matter. So all opinions were valid. I just didn't feel that I needed to argue something that I was basing on scientific evidence and not overstating it or making it prescriptive. So by the time it came to writing my new book, Calm Your Mind with Food, a revolutionary guide to controlling your anxiety, I felt in a better position because during COVID, it gave me the chance to actually really use those principles with individuals, because the thing that surfaced the most was unbounding anxiety, worry, and stress, angst, fill in the word. But it was in this topic, this realm of anxiety. And that's really what I was seeing. So I felt better equipped to write about it and dive deep into the research.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of excitement about this book, and it is so needed. Your first book was very needed too.
Thank you.
But something you talk a lot about in your work that I have found very useful is really exploring how inflammation impacts the brain. And what's something that you wish everybody knew about that, or that you would really like people to kind of internalize about that?
Right. Depending on who the person is and what they're reading, Jessica, I feel like people don't always understand when we use the word inflammation that we are referring to the chronic insidious inflammation, right? Because inflammation helps us heal the body. So it's a very important part of our normal functioning. So if you fall over and scrape your knee or you injure yourself, you want those cells to be responding in your body, to be responding to heal that cut, to heal that injury. But when we talk in nutritional psychiatry, we're really talking about the chronic insidious inflammation that in this case comes on with poor lifestyle, which includes poor nutrition. And by poor, I mean, you just kind of not eating the right things. You are mostly subsisting on fast foods or processed, ultra processed foods. And perhaps that's your lifestyle. That's what you have access to. Perhaps it's been a trying time during the pandemic, or you were afraid when you saw grocery store shelves empty. But if you're doing that and absorbing those foods into your diet, you are going to set up your body through the gut-brain connection, really you're setting yourself up for inflammation, but inflammation that also reaches the brain in terms of neuroinflammation.
Thank you for shining some light on that. I think it's important to make that distinction, because I think sometimes on the internet, people see inflammation and they just think across the board, it's all terrible, horrible. It's like with, the soy and phytoestrogens and estrogen.
Right.
Oh my
Correct.
goodness.
And things tend to get vilified in a certain way or portrayed in a certain way without all of the information being adequately shared. To offer a little bit of a choice for people to know, alcohol is another topic, so is caffeine. None of those are the perfect substances, but actually coffee is a pretty healthy substance. It's the caffeine that gets people into trouble. So I agree, the less we can polarize things and help people make an informed, educated decision, I think the better off we all are certainly for our nutrition.
Something I think there's also a lot of confusion around, or something that I know my patients and clients have expressed feeling confused about and wanting to understand better, is the role of gut health and well-being. And you also do a lot to shine a light on really the role of gut bacteria in anxiety management. And could you share a little bit about why that's important, why we should care?
So where this comes in, I felt that in my second book, I had to revisit the gut-brain connection. I couldn't assume that everyone reading my second book would have read the first book, where it is really based on the gut-brain connection and outlining that as one of the mechanisms that impacts nutritional psychiatry. So the gut and brain are connected, and they're connected from before we're born, because these organs arise from the exact same cells in the human embryo. And I think what's important in anxiety is for us to understand why these gut microbes are important. So it took the work a little deeper this time. And part of it was the research was there and evolving. And, when we talk about things like, let's eat our leafy greens because of, say, the level of folate, yes, that's super important. But the breakdown products that are formed when we eat those healthy foods, those colorful foods, the breakdown products interact with the microbes. And some of those steps of breakdown then impact even the building up of certain neurotransmitters. And that actually becomes critically important. And as we understand how valuable it is taking care of those microbes and what little factories they can be to help us build the right neurotransmitters, the serotonin, the dopamine, whatever it is our body is needing, that becomes super important. We already know and have learned that 95% of the serotonin and the receptors for serotonin are in the gut. And we know that that serotonin is not always readily available for the brain, but the precursors are. And the precursors can come from food. And those precursors to those neurotransmitters can interact with the microbes. So some of that differentiation is really what I spent a lot of time trying to organize in my thinking around how do we get the message across about how to calm your mind with food.
I love that so much. And I do, that is something that I have been fascinated by over the years. Like that was one of the first things that actually got me interested in the food mood connection going on, I think probably 10 years ago when I first started, researching that and talking about it in my work, because it was learning about what really drew me in was learning about tryptophan and the role of tryptophan. And I was like, this is so cool. Like
Exactly. That's such a great example. And by the way, many people just assume when they hear tryptophan, they think Thanksgiving and turkey, but turns out, chickpeas have tryptophan. So it's good to know that there are many sources.
Yeah. So you heard it here, guys. It's not just in Thanksgiving turkey. There are many food sources of tryptophan, or a good amount. So one other thing that I think we've been seeing more discussion about more, in more like lay media is that it's leptin and ghrelin, and particularly leptin and the role that leptin plays in a number of things related to our health and well-being. But in your book, you do discuss the importance of balancing leptin through the diet. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about why this is so important?
Yes. So, it turns out that mental health is so closely linked to our metabolic health. That is also something we've really grown to understand. And so for me, where that becomes critically important in mental health, but also in anxiety, is medications that a person may be taking or maybe coming off of or maybe considering taking. Because the backdrop of our metabolism is also extremely important for us to understand how this could be impactful. So leptin is a hormone secreted by the white adipose tissue of the body. And, it's the type of tissue that makes up most of our fat reserves. Now, often adipose tissue or fat tissue gets demonized, in our culture. But, the healthy human body requires a certain amount of body fat. Same thing with our food. We require some carbohydrates. We require some fats, but healthy fats, more complex carbohydrates. We require the protein from good, clean sources if we can get it. So putting that aside, we want to think of the fat tissue as mostly being inactive. And it's, the thing that helps us keep warm in cold temperatures. But, research has also taught us that it's more of an actual organ. It's part of the endocrine system. And as part of the endocrine system, it secretes hormones that affect the entire body. And leptin is one of these hormones. And the main function of leptin is to signal to the brain when you've had enough to eat by really causing you to feel full or satiated. That's the main purpose of leptin. So it's an important one. And if your metabolism is off kilter, and one of the reasons could be the way that you're eating, it could be stress, it could be poor sleep, it could be all of these factors, all of these sort of lifestyle factors, as we call them, that ability of leptin to function properly can change. And so when you're eating, it is unable to tell you to stop eating because you're not feeling satiated because you may have developed some leptin resistance. So it's an important thing in understanding how we are relating to food and how leptin is signaling us to respond to the food that we're eating.
Yeah. And is there, any particular foods or eating patterns that you would want to highlight that people should kind of keep in mind if they want to keep their leptin levels in a good place?
I do go into greater depth on that in the book, but I will say that men and women are different with the levels of leptin and their responses. And that's actually something to think about and remember as you are making dietary choices as well.
Great. That is super helpful to keep in mind. And now I appreciate when, people who structure these really big topics in a very approachable way. And you structure the book, you have 6 pillars for calming the mind. Would you like to share what those are, or some of the ones you most want people to know about?
I would love to do that. So some of what inspired in this chapter is how I had designed 6 principles for overarching nutritional psychiatry. So how to eat for your better mental health. But then when you narrow it down into the anxiety area, eat whole to be whole is a very important one, because the example I like to give, as I've given before, is eat the orange, skip the store-bought orange juice, which has the fiber removed and a lot of added sugar. We want you to be eating whole foods, because coming back to that metabolism and optimizing your metabolic health, you want to stay away from the highly sugared foods, the unprocessed carbohydrates, which have less fiber and less nutrients in them. So it's an important principle in moving towards calming your body down and moving away from pro-inflammatory foods. Another one is that I've talked about is magnifying micronutrients. Now, in the book, I go into what I consider to be the key micronutrients for you to be quelling your anxiety, fending off that anxiety. And micronutrients, therefore, become really important we talked about serotonin recently. So micronutrients are important actually for neurotransmitter function, helping to produce and regulate chemicals like both dopamine and serotonin, while remembering they all interact with those gut microbes. And I also always say, test, don't guess. If you think you have a micronutrient deficiency, speak to your doctor about getting it tested before you just supplement that shortfall. You want to know that it's really there. And I'm going to share one more with you, which is prioritize the healthy fats. Those healthy fats from unprocessed oils, rich in monounsaturated fatty acids like olive oil and avocado oil, are also anti-inflammatory, and they promote good gut health and metabolic health. So, go towards those oils first. And then we know about omega-3s. They have the polyunsaturated fatty acids. And you can get these from not only seafood, but, your plant-based nuts and seeds are also crucial to get in, your EPA and your DHA from the fatty fish. And then your nuts and seeds and plant-based sources will give you the short-chain ALA. So those are some ways that you can get started on pillars to build your new year, new you, your calming self as you kind of emerge from 2023. It's certainly been an interesting year, because we've, labeled the end of the pandemic. But as I think you and I have seen, Jessica, that there have been a lot of ramifications to people's lives. And I see that in mental health all the time.
Oh my goodness, I'll bet. And I know I see that a lot especially with metabolic health and that consequence as you were just saying, they're so intertwined. Sometimes it's not even clear which one, was which came first. Like,
it was correct. Where did it start? Exactly.
Yeah. And I appreciate you highlighting the healthy fats. I know it's 2023, almost 2024. I still sometimes have to beg people to eat fat. It's amazing.
Undoing the marketing of 3 or 4 decades ago has really been a challenge. And people thinking that they should never eat fat or only eat low fat or no fat is actually very, very troubling, because there are healthy fats that they should be eating and that they should definitely be including irrespective. So I think reinforcing that with the positives and explaining why they're healthy is key. It's key these days.
Yeah. Without the why, forget it. Like, there's so many things pulling for your attention, and that it's important to kind of stay tuned into why you're doing what you're doing to help yourself.
I agree. I think one of the things that people should remember is different phases have brought on changes in how we eat, not necessarily the best way. And so embracing healthy fats is really an important part of getting our minds to feel calmer and our bodies to be less inflamed and our metabolic health to be moving towards a better norm. So none of us is perfect, but if we have some elements of poor metabolic health. We can change that by how we're eating.
Absolutely. And then, so I, something that I find fascinating is how people are so quick to want to label their eating patterns or, have like, yes, I'm following this diet. From a research standpoint, are there any particular eating patterns that you would say are most beneficial for mental health?
I go through different patterns, but I talk about intuitive eating. I talk about the Mediterranean diet. But one of the patterns that I like the most is what I call the Mediterranean diet. So it really is, again, the principles of the Mediterranean diet, but I've really brought in spices and vegetables and fruit and variations, as well as other products, but variations of the Mediterranean diet, but made it more inclusive of other cultures that may want to eat healthy. But when you say Mediterranean, people think of only one region of the world, and there's a lot of good data behind eating these foods. So I think if we expand it a little bit, those recipes and those ideas got me really excited. So I did some combinations of foods that had some Korean elements and spices and vegetables, as well as using those Mediterranean principles. And then I helped people really think about, I've got a lot of questions about fasting, intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, but I actually find my patients use intuitive eating the best, and that they find it easy to do. And it's a principle that can help them modulate the amount they should be eating, the time they should be eating, and they get into a pattern that actually helps balance their blood sugar. It helps them ease their calm because they're not eating a donut for breakfast and then having a bagel for a snack and then having a sandwich for lunch. It's much more whole foods that are less processed and just better for their body.
Yeah, I love that. And I think to your point, there is so much, I don't know if debate is the word I'm looking for out there about intermittent fasting, intuitive eating. And so many people, I think, are, trying to define like which one is the best. And I think it really is so individual. And it really, I think at the end of the day, and I know from what I see in my work, the most important thing is that the patient feels better and that their health improves.
Exactly.
Like
that is the thing that we care about. That is, if that doesn't happen, then what's the point of any of these principles or any of this research? I think ultimately, and that is actually another reason why I tend to be more inclusive in how I think about nutrition principles than eliminating or excluding foods. Because I think the moment that someone feels deprived or feels like, I can't have that donut, I can't have a slice of cake on my birthday, I try to tell people it's not about those day-to-day events that happen in our lives. I wouldn't want to deprive someone of a cupcake on their birthday, but it's much more about the longer game, right? Not only is our longevity important, but the longer game in terms of this being marathon and not a sprint. I'd much rather you have that on your birthday, but then know that the next day you get up, you exercise, you get some sunshine, you eat in, a healthier way, and you kind of resort to those basic principles. And if it's one message I want people to take into the new year, it's that you can enjoy food and you can still actually calm your mind. And there's a real way that you can do it, because we just live with so much of angst and worry all of the time. And I speak from experience of that. So I want all of us to feel our best health when it comes to our mental health.
now for somebody who, they know that their diet is playing a role in, their mental discomfort, or, they know that their mental health is not the best it could be, and they want to make a change, but they're feeling overwhelmed. What might you say would be a good starting place?
So I'm going to say something that seems counterintuitive, but I'm going to ask them to take a step back and sit with themselves a little and almost calm down their system so that they can be open to a new idea or change in how they're eating. And that could be as simple as just having a mindful moment, learning a meditation, learning a breathwork exercise that helps calm down their system. Because I know from personal experience, I cannot take in new information if I'm overwhelmed or if I'm, so stressed that I am sort of beyond a certain point, and how many of those moments did we experience in the last several years. So I asked them to just sort of take a step back, even learn a suggested breath work exercise before they see me, so that they're sort of practicing something that helps calm down their system. And as that happens, ask them, well, is there a habit, a food, a beverage, something you're doing? Maybe you're going to sleep at night with the television on because it's the only way since the pandemic you can sleep. And you fall asleep, but when you actually ask questions more deeply, you're telling me you're actually falling asleep at 1 a.m. when in fact you're getting into bed at 10 p.m. And that may be because all of the lights and the sounds and the television being on, all of this is actually impacting your sleep. It could be as simple as that, or it could be that you've picked up a glass of wine to help you sleep and to calm you down. So to get de-stressed at the end of the day, you're drinking a glass of wine and you know it's going to help you sleep. Unfortunately, it's ramping up your anxiety and it's impacting your sleep architecture. Now, wine or glass of wine in the right context, completely different. So I think just finding what it is, people often know what's bothering them, but sometimes they feel so overwhelmed that they can't articulate it. And it's really important to start there, because to me, it becomes a fulcrum of treatment where we start becomes the starting point of where they can build upon to have a successful nutritional psychiatry plan to help calming their mind.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think what you shared about not being able to take in new information when you're feeling very stressed out and already maybe overloaded. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's so much information coming at us all the time. We don't always stop and listen to ourselves, which is really important.
Great. And that's where it starts, because, if I'm coming in to ask advice, Jessica, I'm happy, that you're eating well, or maybe but it's important what I can figure out for myself, because the other thing is that people don't like to be told what to do. So I engage them in the discussion because I understand a little bit of the psychology of eating and I've studied it. And it's partly, if they can participate in the decision, they want to make the change. If they're told, do these 5 things and take this list and go to the supermarket and buy those foods, they just end up being stunned and not really wanting to do it. And so in the book, what I do is I developed a grocery list for, an anti-anxiety shopping list. But I have placed it in the book at a point where I've shared the science. I talk about where they should be at. So it's a build up to get to that point of, what should I do and what should I buy? And, I want people to be buying the book and taking photographs of those pages and taking it to the supermarket and making the checklist from it, because it's a way to really reframe how we're thinking about those foods.
And I love that so much. I find that so often people will say they want you to just tell them what to do. If I had a nickel for every time I've had someone say, just tell me what to eat, I could buy a villa like in Italy or something, right? Like I think what I always say to people, and I'm like, have you ever been to a dietitian before? No, great. Well, I ask a lot of questions. Like because it's important. Like I think the person does have to feel involved, and it has to come from them. And I think if we just like kind of give them a list like right off the bat without finding out anything about them, that's like hit and run kind of stuff. We don't know what we might have, where that's hitting them, where are they coming from. But I do want to highlight, like, people who don't create recipes and meal plans, I think don't quite understand how complex it is. So I just want to give you a lot of credit for putting those together for this book, because, oh my goodness, it's so, but it's needed, but it does take
it's
a lot.
Needed, but it's so funny how social media and God bless the people who are creating 3 recipes a day and showing us how it's oppressive. But what I will say is, to us everyday human beings, it's not easy. And I spent a lot of time really thinking about what I like to eat and what's flavorful, but I wanted to make it simple and straightforward for people to do. And here's a little teaser, Jess. There are also non-edible components to my recipe section. So you can't eat everything that I have given you a recipe for. But, in reality, we want to eat foods that's flavorful and that we enjoy. And it takes time to think about that, and to test the recipe and to make sure, one of the most calming, not to play on the word, but calming and comforting things was I work as a part-time culinary instructor, so I could very easily have just taken the recipes and given it to my chef colleagues and said, test these recipes. Instead, I made an unusual decision. I shared it with the young members of my team. And I said, look, guys, I have all these recipes that I've developed. They're in my head. I've written them down. I've tested them, but I need you guys to try them and tell me what you think. And I taught them how to give feedback, like chefs would give each other feedback. Because part of training in culinary schools, we test recipes for cookbooks, and actually authors get it for free. They send it to us and we work on them diligently and give them notes, and they publish it. And it's just a system that chefs can learn better how to cook. And they were so excited. So, they bought all the ingredients. And I'll tell you, some of the best feedback I got was not just little tweaks in the recipes or, should we just add this ingredient first, or should we use a little bit more lime, or, could we cut back on that? But several of them just reached out to me and said, I was testing the recipes because I had this number, but then I tried the other recipes that were written, and I've been using it at home with my family, and we're all actually feeling better. I just started to use these recipes more often. So each one had a certain number to test, but then they kind of had all the other recipes and started using it as a way. So inadvertently, they tested the meal plans. And I have this data from my patients, but I thought that was the coolest thing, so with these newest recipes, they were sharing it and using it and having their families eat that way. And it was really great feedback for me.
I love that so much. That's so cool. That must have felt so amazing just to see that just organically they were experiencing exactly what you were hoping they would.
And I was actually looking for, should I have 1 teaspoon of less salt or more of something? They gave me that, and then they gave me more. So it really was a gift. And I think for me, it really helped me believe more deeply in you've written books, Jessica, it's kind of in your head, but then to see it in action and see people actually feeling better, was huge for me.
Oh my gosh, that's the best feeling in the world when something that you created helps somebody. Like I was listening to a podcast today actually, and somebody was talking about my book, The Farewell Tour, and how useful it was. I was like, wait, really? Like about my book? That's so cool.
That's so amazing. Congratulations! It's such a good feeling because it's your work is being shared and someone is taking value from it, and that's so wonderful. It's such great feedback.
Yeah, and just like I'm sure with your patients too, like you see the changes in them, I'm sure, as they start to implement these tools and see for themselves that food can really make a meaningful difference.
I had a lovely moment a few months ago. I got a note from someone I treated who had completed treatment just before my first book, and was writing to tell me how working and having those nutritional psychiatry eating plans, and interestingly, Jessica, she happened to have come to me for anxiety. And when I got her message, I was writing the second book. And she said, the things that you taught me, not only the recipes, but the mindfulness practices and the kind of plan we put together really helped me through the pandemic. I've kept the weight off, my blood sugar is better. She had been diabetic. And my anxiety is still in control. And when I travel or something gets a little bit off, I know the things that I need. I don't get upset with myself. I remember just to go back to the way I was eating. And, sometimes those notes that people write to you are worth, I want to say $1 million, but it's really not the financial value. They're worth so much because they help me feel greater confidence, and this work is so important. It helps people's lives. It helps them live better. It helps them feel calm. It helps them combat the anxiety.
I think one thing I think is that we don't always talk about with this work, and I know we've talked about this previously, just about how the person supporting those clients, those patients, what tools they use in their own life, because I think the caregiver, the provider, needs to be taken care of as well. And I've so appreciated your chatting with me about that before. While working on this book, what were some of your self-care essentials?
So I'll share a little bit about the fact that writing this book, well, the information was easy to gather and I was seeing it clinically. It was very hard for me for a very unusual reason. As I was writing this book, we were still sharing and I was still going on podcasts for my first book. And part of that, I'd say this with humility, was the first book has continued to do very well. So this is, Brain on Food is basically now considered a classic and it's, backlisted and people continue to go to it. And I feel very blessed for that. But it also made me very busy. And that busyness and that success almost tipped me over in the wrong direction because I was trying to put together the thoughts and the outline and proposal and all of the steps, that you go through for your book. And at the same time, recording podcasts and being invited here and there. So it was all good stuff. It was good stress, actually. But it doesn't mean that it didn't affect me, how I was thinking and how I was feeling. So one of the biggest things for self-care that I had to almost lean into more around writing this book was how to manage my stress better. Because stress can come, like I say to people all the time, can come from being successful. And you still need to be able to manage it because you can sleep poorly, you can not be concentrating as well, you can make the wrong food choices, you can be running through an airport and only see fast food and think, well, that's all I should eat then. These things happen because we're all humans. So I would say I really had to go back to my meditation practice in a much more structured way and, learn more breathwork exercises that I could use more often, things like that really just helped to keep me in a zone where I could manage a little bit. It was not easy. It was not easy at all.
Thank you for sharing that. I do, I've seen that it can be really easy to lose sight of the fact that the people out there doing this incredible work are humans on, having a human experience on this planet. So, and I think for you to share that, you need to do what works for you too. It's not just telling other people to do it. I think that makes what you do and what you share with others even more meaningful because, it's what you practice.
Thank you. I think that's important just because if we all don't understand that we are human and we're not perfect, then you're just going to be always disappointed in yourself. And that disappointment makes you feel negative and makes you feel depressed and anxious, and it just doesn't help. But if you can have some grace with yourself and know that, this is a bad eating day, or it's a bad moment, or it's a very stressful time, even if it's a good thing that's happening. You can be on a television show and it can be very stressful because even though it's great, it can be very nerve-wracking. But unless you've gone through it, you don't realize it unless you've experienced it.
So again, Dr. Uma, thank you so much for coming on today. It's always a joy to speak with you. If people want to, check out this book, connect with you, learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to do so?
Jess, thank you so much for having me back. I've always enjoyed talking to you and I appreciate your work so much. So best thing to do is to go to your local bookseller or online where all the booksellers have it available for pre-order or to buy right now. It's called Calm Your Mind with Food, A Revolutionary Guide to Control Your Anxiety. The release date is December 26th of this year, and it will be available where books are sold. You can find me and you can find the book on my website at umanaidoomd.com. And you can also find me, by the way, you can sign up for my newsletter when you go to my website, and that will also give you updates and the new recipes, etc., that are coming out with my new book. And I'm on social media at Dr. Naidoo, which is at DrUmanaidoo. And I'd love to hear from people. And I hope, love to hear the feedback about the book.
Okay, and we will be sure to link to all of that in the show notes. So Dr. Uma, thank you as always. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Love talking to you, and thank you for having me back.
And for all of you guys who are listening in today, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. As always, I appreciate you being here, your energy, your support. Please consider, if you like what you hear, like, share, subscribe, maybe leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. They really do matter and help me continue to bring you wonderful guests like Dr. Naidoo. So as always, guys, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Drama-Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. We'll see you next time.